Because I was. And when your mind is stayed on freedom, well, I woke up this morning with my mind was stayed on freedom. Well, I woke up this morning with my mind. I was stayed on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 Good morning, church. It's been a while since I've been up here. But I ain't looking back, I'm looking forward. I'm looking at you. And you might say, how does a blind man look? He looks good. Whoa! Yeah! I'm going to preach this morning, y'all. I feel like preaching this morning, if you don't mind, because this is a time that we are in, and we sometimes wonder, how did we get here? You know, we're looking at folks that are saying out and out lies, and they're saying it with such a look on their face, like, of course the sky is below and the earth is above. You know, they're saying things like that, and we are going, what? The Supreme Court said we don't care about all the discrimination that has gone before us. We don't care that there has been some advances, but still there are discriminatory actions going on in our country. The Supreme Court said we don't care about that because everyone has the ability to enter into schools just looking at the records. And so all you brown and black people who, because of affirmative action, were given that opportunity to go to these schools, Supreme Court said, not anymore. And then somebody said, what about legacy enrollments? You know, daddy, mommy went to this school, and because daddy, mommy went, I get to go in. And the Supreme Court said, sure, come on. So, church, you know, you hear that, and wait a minute, who is being fair here? So that's one thing that has me wanting to say something about that. There's some more things, you know, right here in T-Town, Tulsa, we are trying to exhume those bodies that were murdered in 1921. And we're trying again to get that done. And still there are some folks who say, enough is enough. Let's not go back that far. Come on, let's move on. And while they are saying that, there are opportunities that we might have are going by the wayside. And I could go on and on that, but I'm not, because I want to preach about what can we do. The title is Faith and Leadership. I chose that title because I believe as Unitarian Universalists, we don't talk about faith enough. We ran to a place that didn't talk about faith. We ran to this place because we wanted to be in a place to be ourselves, and we didn't have something that we had to memorize and say, this is the way it is in church. But we go to a church that says, be yourself and love yourself, because that divine mystery we call God loves you. And it doesn't matter about all these words. God loves you so much. And just hold on to that. And holding on to that love is called faith. That's faith. Holding on to that love that says, you can't do anything to make me stop loving you. Right? So that's my theology. That's how I believe, and I believe most Unitarian Universalists have that. So we don't get scared when we start talking about faith, because That's what we are holding on to, God's love, that divine mystery that says it's going to be all right. So I wanted to lift up, because we could just go TikTok. This is Oklahoma, and every single day there's some insulting thing that comes through to us to say, no, this is how we're going to do it. I could go on and on, but that's depressing. I want to talk about folks who did something about depressing situations. And that brings up the late Congressman John R. Lewis. I want to bring him up because tomorrow will be the 3rd anniversary of his death. He died July 17th in 2020. And so I wanted to lift him up because John R. Lewis is a great example of walking into the face of hatred. Walking there and walking high because he had that word faith and leadership. And we're going to get to leadership later, but let's focus on this faith thing. You see, John grew up in Alabama in the country, y'all. It wasn't, some people used to call him the boy from Troy. He didn't live in Troy, Alabama. He lived way out in the country. They didn't even have a name for it. They called it Carter's Corner, and Carter was based on his mother's people, Carter's Corner. They were sharecroppers. Those are the folks who, after slavery was done, for all you young people that thinks, okay, there was slavery ended and everything was fine. No, young people, don't believe that. In those slavery ended in 1865, we got 1900 and whatever people still working on plantations. Now, they may have said, this is my land, but the seeds, the tools, the horse, mule, or whatever that's drawing this, the plow, all of that belonged to the person who owned the land. And they were sharecropping. They got a share of the crop's money that was bought for the crop, whether it was cotton or whatever it was. They got a share of that. But after all of the adding was done, they didn't break even. And John Lewis grew up amid a whole bunch of children and cousins, whole bunch of people. John was different. John said in the middle of picking cotton with his mother and father and sisters and brothers, he said, this is gambling, and gambling is a sin. And his parents looked at him and said, what are you talking about? He said, we are gambling that we're going to get paid after we get through getting this crop in, and we never do, and we just keep being high in debt, and we just gambling, and that's wrong. And his mother, picking the cotton and talking to him, still said, well, John, she called him Robert, because everybody called him Robert until he got older, and everybody started calling him John. She said, Robert, as she picked the cotton, what are we supposed to do? How are we going to live without doing this? And the young John Robert Lewis said, well, I'm not doing this. And that was a big moment. These were kids, all these kids and cousins, everybody doing the same thing. And here is John Robert Lewis saying he's not going to do it. He has no way to say that because he doesn't know why he's not going to do it. He doesn't know what he's going to do, but he did at church because he had this thing inside of him. He organized his chickens in the chicken coop. He would feed the chickens, he would water them, he would talk to them, and he would preach to them every morning. But his preaching was, you are somebody, chicken. And he had names for all these chickens. He called the chicken by their names. You are somebody. And we love you so much. And the chickens all got quiet, church. They would listen to John as he walked the chicken coop, talking to the chickens. They all sat there in silence listening. Amazing. So when it was time to kill one of those chickens to eat for food, John, it hurt his heart. He hated that. And he would cry. He wouldn't eat that chicken. Now, if somebody else gave them a chicken, John ate it up. But he did not eat his chickens. Church, he didn't do that because John had something on him. John believed that God's love included chickens. So that kind of beauty, and that's what it was just beautiful, made John so different from all his brothers and sisters. So I'm reading his memoir, which is Walking with the Wind. And the title comes from a situation that happened with John's great aunt. The great aunt had all the cousins together, and John said there were about 15 of us, all playing out in the yard. And the aunt had a shotgun house. And for those who don't know what that is, that's a house that's built straight, and just on one side, there are the bedrooms. On the other side, there's a living room, the kitchen, and then the back porch. And that was a shotgun house that you saw those everywhere. They were long. Well, the kids were playing. Great aunt was inside cooking, and a straight line wind came up. We know about straight line winds, don't we? Yeah. Those straight line winds are pretty tough. When it came up, and the aunt said, hurried everyone to come inside the house, and 15 kids and the great aunt, and the house started rising. Parts of the house started lifting up because that wind was blowing. And the aunt herded all the kids to wherever the side was lifted up. So they went to the back and they all huddled together. And then over there, come on, let's run. They all ran that way and they walked that way and they walked all over. And the house stood when it was over. The house was standing. And John learned something from that. He called that walking with the wind. And he said, if we stay together, we can make it, no matter how strong the wind. So that stayed with this young kid, John Robert Lewis. Now I'm going to fast forward to John Robert Lewis goes to college. He made his way through segregated schools, and they were not all that good, but he got to a small college in Nashville, Tennessee called American Baptist College. And he went there to go to college, and he was going to be a preacher because everybody thought John's going to be a preacher. And he went there, and he was poor, and everybody else was poor, and that was fine. But he heard something about nonviolence being taught over at Fisk. It was a little church that was on the campus of Fisk University. So he and some buddies went over, and there was James Lawson teaching these kids from Fisk, Meharry, and American Baptist College about nonviolence. This same James Lawson, who taught Martin Luther King about nonviolence, and Gandhi. James Lawson was there giving these kids the information that they needed to overcome the racist segregation of the South. And John listened intently because he said, this is the God's love that I know is real, that if we hold on to God's love and have that faith, it's going to work. So John Lewis learned nonviolence is the way that we go through this. Now I'm going to fast forward some more because they started doing sit-ins and they had to practice being spat upon and cursed and even hit. They had to practice how to protect themselves. They did all this, church, because they understood there's a bigger story here. They're not just masochists going into a situation to be hurt, but they're saying this is wrong. Segregation is wrong. That you could spend your money at a store, but you couldn't sit down at the counter and drink a Coke. He said that's just wrong. So for something like that, they demonstrated and put their bodies on the line. And yes, they were kicked and spat and hit, but they didn't move and they didn't retaliate because they had discipline. They learned how to do that. So I'm thinking, okay, here it is. I'm mad at the Supreme Court. What can I do? Well, I've already picked the Supreme Court. I went up to the Supreme Court years ago, and I had my sign. I forget what it was I was picketing, but I had my sign, and the guard said, "Don't put 1 foot on the steps of the Supreme Court, or you will go to jail." So we were all ministers and religious people, and we didn't put any any foot on it, although some of us brushed up against it, we just kind of always gonna be the rebel, But anyway, but I had my sign and we did that. And so the important thing about going to face discriminatory actions in public, the most important thing is that you break the code because they don't expect this. Folks don't expect you to be public in your dissent. And when you are public, then it gives them a step back, and that's a good step. We want a step back. So John Lewis did sit-ins, but John Lewis didn't do just sit-ins. In 1964, they did Freedom Summer. John Lewis realized, along with other folk like Bob Moses, that this wasn't just black folks by themselves feeling this way, because God's love includes all of us. So they got young white students at these Ivy League colleges to come down to Mississippi in 1964 and do the good work of being present, sit-ins, as well as riding buses. I mean, some of this stuff you just think, no, there was segregation on buses to go from one city to the other. Yes, you had to sit in the back. You could not sit up front. So they did this thing, and it was horrible. The retaliation was horrible. People were beaten. One time, John Lewis, the owner of the store, was so angry that folks were sitting in that he turned on the fumigation machine and he locked the door, and they were going to be killed. Somebody saw smoke, the fumigating smoke coming out of the building, and called the fire department. And the owner of the store came down and opened the door just before the fire department broke the window. And everyone knew that you were going to kill those kids. And but he said, well, I had the key. I was going to. Well, and yeah, they never arrested him. But that's the kind of danger that John Lewis met as a young man. But he held on to the standard of nonviolence. The issue that when they brought in these white kids, the issue was we have to train them, because these kids were happy. 1964, they were doing good work down in the South. We're going to go down there and they said, no, these people are mean. They will hurt you worse than they'll hurt us because you're white coming down here. But those kids learned. They took them up to Oxford, Ohio, and they taught them how to do the sit-ins. They taught them how to be impervious to the words that was thrown at them, horrible things and said and things thrown at them. They told them how to do this. And so John said, this is the way it should be, because this is America. America knows this is wrong for this to kind of discriminatory acts all over this country. And for those young white kids coming down here doing this, that's great. But then something else happened that complicated stuff. These kids came down and they could type like 70 words a minute. They knew all kind of language. They could speak eloquently and all like this. And some of these black kids who were there, they did not have the same education. They couldn't type maybe 30 words per minute. And so it was an issue of, well, the white kids come and the cameras turned to the white kids. That's right, they were supposed to, because that was the whole point, is to get, now the whole United States will see that this is not just about black people, but there are white kids down here. But it hurt some of the black kids who had been there forever, had been doing good work and had been hurt. But still, no one was talking to them. The cameras weren't there. And no one was saying, let's have an interview with the black kids. So they had to work with the black kids about the white kids coming down. And that together, they worked together. It sounds kind of like what we're doing, huh? Yeah. So that we can talk to one another. We know each other's stories are different. They're different. And so we have to work with, we're overcoming now, we're more sophisticated. This is not about segregation, integration. This is about white supremacy culture. And the culture is the issue here. We don't like that culture because the culture doesn't like women. They want women to be behind. This culture says, white supremacy culture says that. The culture says, if you're trans, we don't want you to play any kind of sports. We want you out of our sight. Right? And you go on and on. That's the culture. That's not good white people and bad white people. That's the culture. That's white supremacy culture. And that's what we're fighting, church. These systems of oppression that keep us down. I didn't even mention Roe being, that is crazy to me. How in the world could they have done that, right? But they did, but we're fighting back. Yeah, we're not just sitting down, we're fighting back. And that's what we have to do, church. John Lewis gave us some models. And that model is do it together, walking with the wind. Do it together, hold on. And the second thing is break it down and talk to the people who are bothered. That's right, get into caucus groups. And let's talk about what it is that's going on, because we got to hold this thing together. Because the culture is not going to stop. It's going to continue. But our job is to fight the culture. Oh yeah, fight the powers that be. That's what they said, right? That's what we have to do. Now, church, I want to move on to leadership. Because if we're holding on to the faith, there's also leadership. And sometimes we think a leader is like ministers or principals or governors or senators, the people up there. But the leader is in you, church. It's in you. You're the leader. You have that ability to speak the truth. And people will hear that. And they'll talk to you about that. Before you know it, you're leading something. I'm going to talk about a little organization called the United League for Social Action. And we grew up because a reserve deputy sheriff shot a black man who was already being restrained by other deputies accidentally. And he was charged. And this all happened because it's grassroots. Someone said, let's have a vigil to express our unhappiness with what happened and to talk about our experiences, how we felt about that. And someone asked, Reverend Gerald, can we have it over at Restoration? That's the church where I pastor. And I said, of course you can have it at Restoration. And we thought we were just going to hold the moment so people could light candles and speak their truth about how they felt about this murder. But instead, people talked about their experience with the police in Tulsa and their experience with the county sheriff in Tulsa. And at the end of that meeting, Jennifer Foray, who used to work here, Jennifer Foray came up to me and said, Reverend Gerald, I used to do community organization in South America. You cannot let this opportunity go by. Let's have another meeting and we will organize it. I said, well, let's do it. Another person named Joy Miller Davis, who I married, came up to me and said, I married her before we did Tulsa. So she came up to me and said, oh, this is perfect. We got to set this thing up and do. So Jennifer and Joy had not talked, but they both had the same idea. Now, I'm the leader, right? It wasn't my idea, but it came to me. And so we ran with it. We wound up doing good work. We got the sheriff to resign. We got the FBI to come down here and investigate Tulsa County Sheriff's Office. We got the implicit bias workshops entered with both the Sheriff's Department and the Tulsa Police. And we're proud of that. Our little group did that. And it was all grassroots. I talked to the U.S. attorney who called me and said, Reverend Gerald, what is Tulsa? This group, what is this group? I said they're grassroots. They're from all over the city. And it's not about, we're sponsored by some nonprofit benevolent organization. No, this is all about people who care. And so the U.S. attorney said, okay. I said, well, okay, are we going to get what we want from the Department of Justice? He said, I can neither confirm nor deny. But let's just say this. You got the attention of Washington, right? So here's the point, church. We are the leaders. We are the people who know better. And we have the faith that keeps us going on and on, the same faith that kept John Lewis, despite being beaten savagely across that Pettus Bridge in Selma, despite all the other beatings that he got before that, despite all of the insults that he got just for being who he was, where he was, he kept going because he had the faith. What is the faith? The faith is God's love. If you don't like the word God, I don't care. It's the faith that's divine, church. It's divine. It didn't come from me or you. It came from a spirit, and that spirit has been on this earth as long as this earth has been this earth. This spirit is what is moving us to make the changes that have to be made. Church, we are the ones that we've been waiting for. And it's important for us to understand that we have that responsibility. So yes, it may be just going to a meeting, or it may be taking a phone call, or it may be going to a vigil. Whatever it is, get up and do it, because that makes the difference. You are the leader. Have the faith. Keep the faith, baby.
I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all these chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things I could say. Say 'em loud, say 'em clear, for the whole world to hear. Say 'em loud, say 'em clear, for the whole world to hear. I wish I could share